The transport ship crashed into the red sand with a sound like thunder. Metal twisted and broke apart as it slid across the desert floor of planet Kethvara. Steam rose from the wreckage as hot metal met cold desert air. Jinwoo Kim crawled out of the broken ship first. His head hurt and his arm was bleeding, but he was alive. He looked around at the endless desert that stretched in every direction. Red sand dunes rolled away like frozen waves under two pale suns. Everyone alive? Jinwoo called out in the common trade language they all spoke. Nari Choi climbed out next, her xenobiology equipment bag clutched tight in her hands. She was his research partner and the only other human on the team. Blood ran down her forehead, from a cut. But she nodded at him. "I am fine," she said in her quiet voice. The aliens came out after them. Veltar the Saurian stood tall on his four legs, his scaled hide gleaming green and gold in the strange sunlight. He was their team leader, proud of his ancient race and their great technology. His reptilian eyes looked cold as they scanned the desert. "This should not have happened," Veltar said, his voice deep and commanding. "Saurian navigation systems do not fail." Wisp floated out of the wreck like a living cloud of light. The Luminar was an energy being, glowing white and blue like captured lightning. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "The electromagnetic readings were wrong," Wisp said, its light flickering with what might have been annoyance. "My calculations were perfect. Something else caused this crash." The last to emerge was Grok, the massive Chithari warrior. He looked like a giant insect standing on two legs with four arms and a hard shell covering his body. His mandibles clicked as he spoke. "Ship is broken," Grok said in his simple way. "We are stuck here." Jinwoo pulled out a small device and checked their location. They were far from any settlement, deep in the desert where the geological survey had been taking them. The nearest rescue station was hundreds of miles away. Even if they sent a distress signal, it would take days for help to arrive. "We need shelter," Jinwoo said, looking at the two suns overhead. "This planet has extreme temperature changes. It gets very hot during the day and freezing cold at night. We need protection." The aliens looked at him like he was stating something obvious. "Of course we need shelter," Veltar said with a snort. "But we are not primitive creatures, we have proper technology." Veltar walked to a clear area near the crash site. He placed his clawed hands on the ground and closed his eyes. His body began to glow with a soft green light. The sand around his hands started to change, turning into smooth crystal. The crystal grew upward and outward, forming walls that curved into a perfect dome. In minutes, Veltar had created a beautiful shelter made of clear, strong crystal. The dome was perfectly smooth and reflected the light of the twin suns. It looked like something from a fairy tale. "Saurian geomanipulation technology," Veltar said with pride. "This shelter will maintain perfect temperature and protect against all weather. It is far superior to any primitive construction." Wisp floated to another spot and began to spin faster and faster. Energy crackled around the Luminar, creating sparks of light that danced in the air. The energy formed into a barrier, a wall of pure force that shimmered like water. "Energy barrier construction," Wisp announced. "My shelter will repel all harmful elements including sand, wind, and radiation. It is based on advanced Luminar physics that lesser species cannot understand." Grok simply started digging. His four arms moved like machines, scooping out sand, and rock at incredible speed. Soon he had carved a deep hole in the ground. He used pieces of metal from the crashed ship to reinforce the walls and create a roof over the underground space. "Chithari always dig deep," Grok said, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "Underground is safe. Above ground is for weak creatures." The three aliens stood back and admired their work. Their shelters looked impressive and advanced, each one showing off their species' special abilities. Jinwoo watched them work, then walked over to the pile of wreckage from their ship. He began pulling out pieces of metal, sheets of fabric, and various other materials. The aliens watched him with growing amusement. "What are you doing, human?" Veltar asked, his tone making it clear he thought humans were inferior. "Building shelter," Jinwoo said simply. He dragged a large piece of curved metal away from the wreck. It had been part of the ship's hull, bent and twisted by the crash. To the aliens, it looked like useless junk. Jinwoo began to dig, but not like Grok had dug. Instead, he made shallow trenches in specific patterns. He used a small shovel from the emergency kit, measuring distances carefully and checking angles with a simple tool. "That is pathetic," Wisp said, its light pulsing with what seemed like laughter. "Human construction methods are so primitive. You are wasting time and energy on inefficient design." Jinwoo did not respond. He kept working, placing the curved metal sheet at an angle and securing it with pieces of debris. He found more materials, fabric panels, flexible tubing, metal, rods, and began connecting them in ways that made no sense to the watching aliens. His shelter started to look like a mess of random parts stuck together. The metal sheets were bent and patched. The fabric flapped in the wind. Nothing matched, and it all seemed ready to fall apart at any moment. Nari watched her fellow human work. She wanted to help him, but she also looked worried. The alien shelters looked so much better, stronger, more advanced, more impressive. Jinwoo's construction looked like something a child might build from trash. "Jinwoo," she said quietly in Korean. "Maybe we should accept their invitation to share their shelters. Your construction, it does not look very strong." Jinwoo paused in his work and wiped sweat from his face. "Trust me, Nari," he said. "This will work." "But how can you be sure?" she asked. "Because this design has been tested," Jinwoo said. "By hurricanes on Earth, by blizzards in Antarctica, by sandstorms in the Sahara Desert. Every piece of this shelter is based on thousands of years of human experience surviving in hostile environments." The aliens heard them speaking, and Veltar slithered over, his expression full of condescension. "Human," he said, "your species is known for being emotional and fearful. You see danger everywhere because you are weak. But we are not weak. Our technology is proven across many worlds. Your primitive methods might work on your backward planet, but this is a civilized expedition. My calculations show that your construction has multiple structural weaknesses," Wisp added, floating closer to examine Jinwoo's work. "The materials are mismatched, the angles are wrong, and the whole design violates basic engineering principles. It will not provide adequate protection." Grok climbed out of his underground bunker and looked at the human shelter with disgust. "Looks like nest made by sick animal," he said. "Humans are weak. Should have stronger shells like Chithari." Despite their criticism, Jinwoo continued working. He added more angled pieces, creating what looked like random barriers and walls. He strung rope between various points, making a complex web of support lines. He left gaps and openings that seemed like obvious weaknesses to the aliens. "Why are you leaving holes?" Veltar demanded. "Those gaps will let in sand and wind." "Airflow," Jinwoo said simply. "Airflow." Wisp's light flickered with confusion. "That makes no sense. Proper shelter seals out all external elements." "Different philosophy," Jinwoo said. He was now working on what looked like a series of baffles, angled plates that would redirect wind in specific directions. "We do not try to stop the wind. We guide it." The aliens exchanged looks that clearly said they thought the human was crazy. As the day wore on, Jinwoo continued refining his shelter. He added more layers of different materials, each one serving a purpose that was not obvious to the others. He tested the flexibility of his support ropes, adjusted angles, and made small changes that seemed pointless. The alien shelters, meanwhile, stood perfect and unchanged. Veltar's crystal dome sparkled in the sunlight. Wisp's energy barrier hummed with power. Grok's bunker was solid and hidden underground. They all looked like examples of superior technology. "Human construction is amusing," Veltar said to the others as they watched Jinwoo work. "Like watching a primitive trying to understand fire." "The inefficiency is remarkable," Wisp agreed. "So much effort for such poor results. This is why humans will never advance beyond their current level." "Should just live underground," Grok said. "Much safer." Nari felt embarrassed by her fellow humans' apparent failure. The aliens were right. Their shelters looked so much better. She began to think that maybe human engineering really was inferior to alien technology. As the first of the two suns began to set, Jinwoo finally stopped working. His shelter looked like a ramshackle collection of junk held together by rope and prayer. It was not tall or impressive like the crystal dome. It did not glow with energy like the barrier. It was not hidden safely underground like the bunker. It just sat there, looking fragile and temporary. "Are you finished with your construction?" Veltar asked, barely hiding his amusement. "For now," Jinwoo said. He was tired and dirty from his work, but he seemed satisfied. "You are welcome to shelter with us," Veltar offered, though his tone suggested he expected Jinwoo to be grateful for such generosity. "Your structure does not look safe." "Thank you," Jinwoo said politely. "But this will be fine." The alien. 3 days passed on the harsh desert world, and the differences between the shelters became more obvious with each passing hour. Veltar's crystal dome worked exactly as promised. The temperature inside stayed perfect, while the desert outside swung between scorching heat and freezing cold. The crystal walls were beautiful to look at, catching and reflecting the light of the twin suns during the day and glowing softly at night. "See how superior Saurian technology is," Veltar said on the second morning as he emerged from his dome. "Perfect climate control, complete protection, and aesthetically pleasing. This is what advanced civilization produces." Wisp's energy barrier was equally impressive. Sand and wind hit the shimmering wall and bounced away like water off glass. The luminar floated inside its protected space, glowing with satisfaction. "My barrier repels all harmful elements with 99.7% efficiency," Wispy announced to anyone who would listen. "The mathematical precision of luminar energy manipulation is beyond the understanding of most species." Grok's underground bunker kept him cool during the hot days and warm during the cold nights. The Chithari warrior emerged each morning looking refreshed and strong. "Underground is always best," Grok said, clicking his mandibles. "Surface dwellers do not understand proper protection." Meanwhile, Jinwoo's shelter looked worse each day. The desert wind rattled the metal sheets. Sand gathered in corners and crevices. The fabric panels flapped and snapped in the breeze, making noise all through the night. But Jinwoo did not seem bothered by the apparent problems with his construction. Instead, he spent his time making what looked like pointless improvements. The first day he added strange angled pieces that stuck out from the main structure like fins or wings. The aliens watched him work and shook their heads. "What are those supposed to do?" Veltar asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "Wind breaks," Jinwoo said, adjusting the angle of one piece by a few degrees. "Wind breaks?" Wisp floated, over to examine the additions. "Those will not stop wind. They are too small and poorly positioned." "They are not meant to stop wind," Jinwoo explained patiently. "They redirect it." The aliens did not understand, and they made it clear they thought Jinwoo was wasting his time. On the second day, Jinwoo began adding more layers to his shelter. He found more fabric and metal sheets from the wreck and attached them to his existing structure in what seemed like random patterns. "Now you're just making it heavier and more complicated," Veltar observed. "Efficient design uses the minimum materials necessary." "Different materials for different purposes," Jinwoo said. He was attaching a layer of flexible plastic sheeting over a section of metal plating. "This layer breathes. This layer insulates. This layer deflects." "Deflects what?" Wisp asked, its light pulsing with impatience. "Impact," Jinwoo said simply. The aliens exchanged looks that clearly said they thought the human had lost his mind. On the third day, Jinwoo started working on what looked like a complex system of ropes and flexible supports. He strung cables between different parts of his shelter and attached them to stakes driven deep into the sand. The whole thing began to look like a spider web made of salvaged materials. "This is becoming ridiculous," Veltar said, his voice rising with frustration. "You are wasting valuable salvaged materials on this mess. Those components could be used for useful purposes." "Like what?" Jinwoo asked, not looking up from his work. "Communication equipment," Veltar said, "or better tools for finding." food and water, or improvements to our proper shelters. Your shelters do not need improvements, Jinwoo said. They are perfect, remember? Veltar's eyes narrowed at what sounded like sarcasm. Wisp floated closer, its energy form crackling slightly. The human is being wasteful and illogical. These materials should be shared among the group for optimal survival. I found these materials, Jinwoo said calmly. I am using them. But you are using them stupidly, Grok interjected, emerging from his bunker. All this work for weak shelter. Should dig underground instead. Much better protection. The tension in the group was growing. The aliens began to see Jinwoo's continued construction work as selfish and foolish. They had perfect shelters that worked exactly as intended. Why was the human wasting time and materials on his obviously inferior design? Nari found herself caught in the middle. She had been staying with Jinwoo in his makeshift shelter, but the experience was not comfortable. The structure creaked and swayed in the wind. Sand found its way inside despite Jinwoo's efforts. The temperature was not as well controlled as in the alien shelters. Jinwoo, she said quietly on the third evening. Maybe we should reconsider. Their shelters really do work better. Do they? Jinwoo asked, making a small adjustment to one of his support ropes. Well, yes, Nari said, confused by the question. The crystal dome has perfect climate control. The energy barrier keeps out all the sand and wind. The underground bunker is completely protected. Jinwoo said non-committally. So why do you keep working on this? Nari gestured at the ramshackle structure around them. Because this is not finished yet, Jinwoo said, and because their shelters are designed for normal conditions. What do you mean, normal conditions? Jinwoo pointed to his cobbled-together instrument panel. Look at these readings. Nari looked at the display, but the numbers meant nothing to her. What am I looking at? Barometric pressure, Jinwoo said. It has been dropping steadily for 2 days. And look at this. Electromagnetic interference is increasing. So those are signs of a major weather system approaching. Nari frowned. But the aliens' instruments do not show any dangerous weather coming. Their instruments are designed for their homeworlds, Jinwoo said. They might not read this planet's weather patterns correctly. Are you saying their advanced technology is wrong? Jinwoo was quiet for a moment, listening to the wind. I am saying their technology is different. It works perfectly for what it was designed to do, but it was not designed for this planet. The next morning, the conflict came to a head. Veltar slithered out of his crystal dome and found Jinwoo adding yet another modification to his shelter. A series of small flaps that could open and close like valves. Enough, Veltar said, his voice sharp with authority. You will stop this wasteful construction immediately. Jinwoo looked up from his work. Why? Because you are using materials that belong to the entire group, Veltar said. And because your primitive efforts are embarrassing to watch. I am embarrassing you? Yes, Veltar said bluntly. We are supposed to be a professional expedition team. Having one member build such a pathetic shelter makes us all look incompetent. Wisp floated over to join the confrontation. The human's construction violates basic engineering principles, the Luminar said. It is an insult to intelligent design. My shelter works, Jinwoo said calmly. It barely works, Veltar snorted. It rattles and shakes in the wind. Sand gets inside. The temperature fluctuates wildly. By any objective measure, it is inferior to our constructions. By your measures, maybe. Veltar's eyes flashed with anger. Are you suggesting that Saurian engineering standards are somehow inadequate? I am suggesting that different situations require different solutions. This is a desert planet, Wisp said, its light pulsing with irritation. The situation is quite simple. Provide protection from heat, cold, and wind. Our shelters accomplish this efficiently. Yours does not. Grok climbed out of his bunker to see what the argument was about. Humans always complicate simple things, he said. Dig hole, get protection, easy. Your hole would not protect you from a flash flood, Jinwoo pointed out. No flash floods here, Grok said confidently. Desert is dry. Flash floods happen. In deserts, Jinwoo said. Especially when what? Veltar demanded. Jinwoo looked at his instruments again. The readings were getting worse. When there are severe weather events, our instruments detect no severe weather, Wisp said. Your primitive sensors are obviously malfunctioning. My sensors are working fine, Jinwoo said. They are just reading different things than yours. Impossible, Veltar said. Saurian meteorological technology is the most advanced in the galaxy. If there were dangerous weather approaching, we would know. Unless your technology is not calibrated for this planet's specific conditions, Jinwoo said. The suggestion that their advanced technology might be flawed sent the aliens into a fury. How dare you? Veltar hissed. Saurian technology has been perfected over thousands of years. It works on every planet in known space. Known to you, Jinwoo said quietly. Are you suggesting that humans know things that Saurians do not? Veltar's voice was dangerous now. I am suggesting that every planet is different, Jinwoo said, and sometimes local knowledge is more valuable than general technology. Local knowledge? Wisp's light flared brighter. You have been on this planet for 3 days. What local knowledge could you possibly have? The knowledge that my instruments are showing signs of a major storm system. Your instruments are wrong, Veltar said flatly. Maybe, Jinwoo said, but if they are right and a big storm hits, what will happen to your perfect shelters? Nothing, Veltar said with absolute confidence. They are designed to withstand any weather on your homeworlds. Weather is weather, Grucky said impatiently. Wind, rain, heat, cold, all same things. Jinwoo shook his head. Weather on. The morning of the 4th day brought an eerie stillness to the desert. The wind that had been constant since their arrival suddenly died to nothing. The air felt thick and heavy, like breathing through wet cloth. Jinwoo woke before dawn and immediately checked his instruments. What he saw made his heart race. The barometric pressure had dropped even further overnight, and the electromagnetic readings were spiking wildly. He quickly calibrated his makeshift weather station and ran the calculations, 3 times to be sure. Each time the results were the same and they were terrifying. Nari, he said, shaking his partner awake. We have a problem. Nari sat up, instantly alert. Years of fieldwork had taught her to recognize that tone in Jinwoo's voice. What kind of problem? Jinwoo showed her the instrument readings. A massive storm system is approaching from the deep desert. The pressure drop indicates winds that could exceed 200 miles per hour. The electromagnetic activity suggests the sand will be electrically charged. Nari looked at the numbers and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. How long do we have? Based on the rate of change, maybe 6 hours, maybe less. We need to warn the others. They crawled out of their shelter into the strange stillness. The desert stretched away in all directions, looking peaceful under the pale light of the rising suns. But Jinwoo could see signs that the others missed. The way the sand seemed to shimmer slightly, the odd color of the sky on the horizon, the complete absence of the small desert creatures they had been seeing. The aliens were already awake and moving around their perfect shelters. Veltar emerged from his crystal dome, stretching his 4 legs and looking satisfied with another comfortable night. The weather is pleasant today, he observed. Very calm. That is the problem, Jinwoo said, approaching the group. The calm means something big is coming. Veltar looked at him with the same expression he might use for a child claiming to see monsters. What are you talking about, human? My instruments show a major storm system approaching, Jinwoo said. Extremely high winds, electrical activity, probably a massive sandstorm. We need to take precautions. Wisp floated out of its energy barrier, pulsing with what seemed like amusement. Your primitive instruments are malfunctioning again. My advanced sensors detect no weather disturbances. What do your sensors tell you about current conditions? Jinwoo asked. Temperature steady, humidity low, wind speed 0, electromagnetic activity within normal parameters, Wisp recited. Perfect weather for this type of planet. And that does not seem strange to you? That the wind completely stopped after 3 days of constant breeze? Weather patterns change, Veltar said dismissively. This is normal atmospheric behavior. Jinwoo pulled out his instruments and showed them the readings. Look at the pressure drop. Look at the electromagnetic spikes. These are classic signs of an approaching supercell storm system. Veltar glanced at the crude display with obvious contempt. Those readings are meaningless. Your cobbled-together equipment cannot possibly match the precision of Saurian meteorological technology. My equipment is reading something your technology is missing. Impossible, Wisp said firmly. Luminar energy sensors are calibrated to detect all forms of atmospheric disturbance. If there were a storm coming, I would know. Grok emerged from his underground bunker and listened to the conversation with growing impatience. Too much talk, he said. Weather is weather. My bunker protects from all weather. This will not be normal weather, Jinwoo insisted. The conditions on this planet can create storm systems unlike anything you have seen on your home worlds. How would you know? Veltar asked coldly. You have been here for 4 days. We have advanced meteorological databases covering thousands of planets. But not this planet specifically. The fundamental principles are the same everywhere. Jinwoo felt frustration building in his chest. The fundamental principles are the same, but the specific conditions create different results. This planet has 2 suns, different atmospheric composition, different magnetic fields. When all those factors combine in a storm system, the results can be extreme. You are letting human fear cloud your judgment, Veltar said. Your species sees danger everywhere because you evolved on a hostile world. But we have advanced beyond such primitive reactions. This is not fear, Jinwoo said, trying to keep his voice calm. This is experience. Humans have survived storms on dozens of different worlds. We know how to read the signs. What signs? Wisp asked, its light flickering with irritation. Jinwoo pointed toward the horizon. Look at the color of the sky. See how it has that orange tint? That is light refraction through charged particles. And look at the sand. See how it seems to shimmer? That is static electricity building up. The aliens looked where he pointed, but they saw nothing unusual. The sky looks normal to me, Veltar said. Because your eyes evolved on a different world, Jinwoo explained. You are not sensitive to the specific wavelengths that indicate atmospheric charging. Convenient excuse, Wisp said sarcastically. Only humans can see these supposed danger signs. Not only humans, Jinwoo said. Any species that has experience with electrically active storm systems would recognize them. But your species all come from more stable worlds. Our worlds are not stable, Veltar said, his pride stung. The Saurian homeworld has severe weather events. What kind of weather events? Volcanic storms, tectonic hurricanes, plasma rainfall. All involving solid surfaces and predictable energy sources, Jinwoo said. This is different. This is an atmospheric phenomenon involving electromagnetic interaction between charged particles, dual solar radiation, and specific mineral content in the sand. Grok clicked his mandibles impatiently. Human talks too much. Weather comes, we go underground. Simple. Underground will not help if the storm creates pressure differentials that turn your bunker into a wind tunnel. Wind tunnel? Grok looked confused. If the storm creates the right conditions, the air pressure above ground will drop so fast that air will be sucked up from underground spaces at tremendous speed. Your bunker could become a death trap. The idea that his perfect underground shelter could be dangerous made Grok angry. Impossible, he said. Underground is always safe. Chitauri have used underground shelters for millions of years. On your home world, Jinwoo said. This planet has different conditions. You keep saying that, Veltar said, his voice rising. But you provide no proof. Your instruments are primitive, your theories are unproven, and your entire argument is based on human paranoia. My argument is based on physics and experience. Whose experience? You have never been in a storm on this planet before. No, but I have been in similar storms on similar planets. And I have studied the historical data from human exploration. Missions. Human exploration missions, Wisp said, its light pulsing with what might have been laughter. Your species has been in space for what? A few hundred years? We have been exploring the galaxy for millennia. But you explore as conquerors and colonizers, Jinwoo said. You bring your technology and impose it on new worlds. Humans explore as survivors. We learn to adapt to local conditions. Adaptation is for lesser species, Veltar said coldly. Advanced species control their environment. And when the environment fights back, we control it harder. Jinwoo looked at the alien shelters. The perfect crystal dome, the flawless energy barrier, the solid underground bunker. They were impressive examples of technological mastery, designed to impose order on chaos. His own shelter looked like chaos itself, a jumbled mess of different materials, angles, and supports that seemed to have no central plan or organizing principle. Please, Jinwoo said, making one last attempt. Even if you do not believe my readings, would it hurt to take some precautions? Maybe reinforce your shelters or add some flexibility to handle unexpected conditions? Our shelters do not need reinforcement, Veltar said with finality. They are perfect as they are. And even if they were not perfect, Wisp added, we would not modify advanced technology based on the fears of a primitive species. Jinwoo is not primitive, Nari said quietly. She had been listening to the argument, with growing unease. The readings on his instruments did look alarming, even if she did not fully understand them. Then why does he see danger where none exists? Veltar asked. Maybe because he has learned to recognize dangers that you have not encountered before. Impossible, Veltar said. Saurian exploration teams have encountered every type of planetary hazard in the known galaxy. This galaxy is very big, Nari pointed out, and there are always new things to discover. Not new things, Wisp corrected. New variations on known things, and our technology is adaptive enough to handle any variation. Grok nodded agreement. Strong shelter handles all weather. Weak shelter fails. Human shelter is weak, so human is afraid. The aliens had made up their minds. Nothing Jinwoo could say would convince them that their advanced technology might not be adequate for the conditions they were about to face. But as the morning wore on, even they began to notice that something was different. The air grew thicker and more oppressive. The light from the twin suns seemed dimmed as if filtered through an invisible haze. Small electronic devices began to malfunction, displays flickering, communication equipment producing static. Minor electromagnetic interference. Wisp! The storm struck like the wrath of an angry god. The first sign was not wind but sound, a roar that seemed to come from the planet itself, so deep and powerful that it made the ground shake. Then came the wind, hitting with force that exceeded even Jinwoo's worst predictions. In seconds, the world transformed from a peaceful desert into a hellscape of screaming air and flying debris. The temperature plummeted as the massive storm system blocked out both suns, then spiked upward as friction heated the churning atmosphere. Inside his makeshift shelter, Jinwoo felt the structure flex and bend under the assault. The fabric walls snapped and rippled like flags in a hurricane, but they held. The metal sheets rattled and sang with the wind, but his flexible support system allowed them to move without breaking. It sounds like the world is ending, Nari shouted over the roar, gripping one of the support cables as the shelter swayed around them. This is just the beginning, Jinwoo called back, checking his instruments. What he saw there made his stomach clench with worry. The electromagnetic readings were off the scale. Outside, the alien shelters faced their first real test. Veltar huddled inside his beautiful crystal dome as the storm raged around him. At first, everything seemed fine. The crystal walls held strong against the wind, and the climate control system maintained perfect temperature despite the chaos outside. But the Saurian had built his shelter based on the stable conditions of his homeworld. Saurian crystals were grown in geologically quiet environments with consistent temperatures. They were incredibly strong, but only under the conditions they were designed for. The storm brought something Veltar had never experienced. Rapid extreme temperature changes. As the massive system moved overhead, the temperature swung wildly between freezing and scorching in the span of minutes. The crystal dome, designed for gradual temperature changes, began to suffer thermal shock. Microscopic cracks appeared in the perfect walls as the material expanded and contracted faster than its structure could handle. But the real problem was the wind itself. On Veltar's homeworld, wind was just moving air. But this storm carried sand particles charged with electrical energy, moving at incredible speed. When they struck the crystal dome, they did not just bounce off. They resonated. The dome began to sing, a high-pitched tone that grew louder as the wind increased. The frequency matched the natural resonance of the crystal structure, and the entire shelter started to vibrate like a giant bell. Veltar felt the vibrations in his bones as the beautiful walls around him turned into a trap. The harmonic resonance was building toward a catastrophic frequency, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Wisp faced different but equally deadly problems. The Luminar's energy barrier had worked perfectly against normal wind and sand. But this storm brought massive electromagnetic disturbance that interfered with Wisp's ability to maintain coherent form. The charged sand particles created a storm of static electricity that disrupted the energy patterns Wisp used to exist. Each impact sent feedback through the Luminar's consciousness like electric shocks. Worse, the electromagnetic chaos was scrambling the precise energy frequencies needed to maintain the barrier. Wisp tried to compensate, pouring more power into the protective field, but the interference grew stronger with every passing moment. The Luminar began to flicker, its normally steady glow becoming erratic and unstable. The barrier wavered, sections of it becoming transparent as Wisp lost control of the energy matrix. In the underground bunker, Grok discovered that his safe refuge had become a death trap. The massive pressure differences created by the storm turned his carefully excavated shelter into a wind tunnel. The storm system created a low-pressure zone above ground that sucked air up from underground spaces with tremendous force. What had been a quiet, protected bunker became a howling vortex as air rushed upward through every opening. Sand poured in through the ventilation gaps Grok had carefully designed for air circulation. But this was not the gentle flow of normal sand. This was a high-pressure stream of abrasive particles moving fast enough to strip flesh from bone. The Chithari warrior found himself trapped in an underground sandblaster, unable to see or breathe as his perfect shelter filled with deadly, fast-moving debris. His rigid construction methods, perfect for the stable soil conditions of his homeworld, could not adapt to the way the desert sand behaved under extreme conditions. The sand became almost liquid under the pressure changes, flowing around and under his metal reinforcements. The bunker walls began to collapse as the foundation shifted beneath them. Meanwhile, Jinwoo's ramshackle shelter performed exactly as designed. The angled baffles he had built redirected the wind flow around the structure instead of fighting it directly. The multiple layers of different materials each served their purpose. The outer fabric took the impact and dispersed it. The middle layer provided insulation, and the inner shell protected the occupants. Most importantly, the flexible support system allowed the entire structure to bend and sway with the storm instead of trying to resist it. Like a tree in a hurricane, Jinwoo's shelter gave way before the wind but did not break. The carefully calculated gaps and openings prevented pressure buildup that could tear the shelter apart, while the complex baffle system kept out the worst of the sand and debris. "How is it holding together?" Nari shouted, amazed that the flimsy-looking structure was surviving conditions that would destroy a normal building. "Because it was designed to fail safely," Jinwoo called back, monitoring the storm's progress on his instruments. "Every part can break without bringing down the whole structure." A massive gust hit them, and the shelter flexed so far that Nari was sure it would tear apart, but the flexible joints absorbed the stress. The support cables redistributed the load, and the structure snapped back into shape like a rubber band. "This is impossible," Nari said, watching pieces of metal debris fly past their thin walls at tremendous speed. "We should be dead." "We should be dead if we were fighting the storm," Jinwoo said. "But we are not fighting it. We are dancing with it." The storm's fury continued to build. Lightning began to crackle through the charged sand, creating a deadly light show outside. The temperature swings became even more extreme as the massive system's internal weather patterns clashed and merged. And one by one, the advanced alien shelters began to fail catastrophically. Veltar's crystal dome reached its resonance breaking point. With a sound like a giant wine glass shattering, the perfect walls exploded outward in a shower of deadly crystal shards. The Saurian was caught in the center of the destruction, cut by flying crystal and suddenly exposed to the full fury of the Storm. The wind hit him like a physical blow, and the charged sand began to sandblast his scales. He tried to run, but the storm was too powerful. Within moments, he was lost in the swirling chaos, calling out in pain and terror as his perfect shelter became his enemy. Wisp's energy barrier collapsed completely as the electromagnetic interference overwhelmed the Luminar's ability to maintain coherent form. The energy being found itself scattered and disoriented, its consciousness fragmented by the electrical chaos. Without the barrier's protection, Wisp was exposed to conditions that threatened its very existence. The charged particles in the storm created feedback loops in the Luminar's energy matrix, causing sections of its form to destabilize and flicker out of existence. Wisp tried to flee, but its disrupted energy patterns made coordinated movement almost impossible. The once proud being tumbled through the storm like a broken light bulb, its glow becoming weaker with each passing moment. In his collapsing bunker, Grok fought desperately to escape as sand and debris poured in from above. But the pressure differential had turned his ventilation system against him, creating a suction that pulled him toward the deadly stream of particles. His forearms, normally so strong, could barely maintain a grip against the incredible forces at work. The metal reinforcements he had installed were being torn loose by the shifting sand, and the walls were caving in around him. The warrior who had boasted about the safety of underground shelters found himself buried alive in his own construction, choking on sand and unable to find a way out. From inside his swaying but intact shelter, Jinwoo heard the sounds of destruction over the storm's roar. The crash of breaking crystal, the electronic whine of failing energy systems, the rumble of collapsing Earth. The others, Nari said, her face pale with realization. Their shelters are failing. Jinwoo nodded grimly. He had hoped the aliens would listen to his warnings, but pride and prejudice had made them deaf to reason. We have to help them, Nari said. In this storm? Jinwoo looked at the chaos outside their thin walls. It would be suicide. But we cannot just let them die. Jinwoo was quiet for a moment, listening to the sounds of his fellow expedition members in distress. Everything logical told him to stay inside his shelter and wait for the storm to pass. Going out into that hellscape would almost certainly mean death for him and Nari both. But somewhere in the storm were three beings who had mocked his work, dismissed his warnings, and treated him like an inferior creature. They had made it clear they considered humans to be primitive and fearful, and they needed help. Jinwoo began gathering emergency supplies: rope, breathing apparatus, protective gear. Stay here, he told Nari. Moving through the storm was like walking through hell itself. The wind came from every direction at once, trying to lift Jinwoo off his feet or slam him into the ground. The charged sand stung every exposed inch of skin, and the noise was so overwhelming it seemed to come from inside his bones. But Jinwoo had advantages the aliens did not understand. Human evolution had been shaped by countless natural disasters on Earth. Hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. Generation after generation had passed down the hard-learned lessons of survival. He moved like the storm rescuers of his homeworld, using the wind patterns instead of fighting them. When a gust tried to push him sideways, he leaned into it and let it carry him toward his destination. When debris flew at him, he used techniques learned from Antarctic explorers, making himself small and letting the danger pass over him. His safety line stretched behind him, connecting him to the one stable point in the chaos, his makeshift shelter that bent but did not break. The first person he found was Veltar. The proud Saurian was huddled behind the wreckage of his crystal dome, bleeding from dozens of cuts where the shattered walls had torn his scales. His four legs were shaking from cold and shock, and his eyes were wide with terror. Human. Veltar's voice was barely audible over the storm. But this is impossible. You should not be able to survive out here. Different survival techniques, Jinwoo shouted, pulling emergency medical supplies from his pack. He quickly applied pressure bandages to the worst cuts while the wind tried to tear the materials from his hands. My dome, Veltar said in a dazed voice. It was perfect. The calculations were exact. It should have worked. It did work, Jinwoo said, helping the injured alien to his feet. It worked perfectly for the conditions it was designed for. But this planet has different conditions. He wrapped his emergency cloak around Veltar's shivering form and clipped a safety line to the Saurian's harness. Stay low, follow my lead, and do exactly what I do. The journey back to the shelter was a nightmare of wind and flying debris. Veltar stumbled and fell twice, and each time Jinwoo had to help him back up while fighting to maintain his own balance in the chaos. But they made it. Nari was waiting at the shelter entrance and helped pull Veltar inside. The Saurian collapsed, on the floor, shaking not just from cold but from the shock of having his worldview shattered along with his dome. "One down, 2 to go," Jinwoo said, checking his equipment. "Jinwoo, please," Nari begged. "You almost died getting him. The others are even further away, which means they need help even more." Before she could argue further, he was back out in the storm. Finding Wisp was harder because the Luminar's energy form was scattered and barely visible in the electromagnetic chaos. Jinwoo had to follow the faint traces of disrupted energy patterns, reading them like a tracker following broken twigs in a forest. He found Wisp flickering weakly behind a pile of debris, its normally brilliant glow reduced to a dim, unstable pulse. The energy being was barely coherent, its consciousness fragmented by the electrical interference. "Wisp?" Jinwoo called out. "I need you to try to hold together. I am going to create a Faraday cage around you." Working quickly, he used metal debris and wire from his emergency kit to construct a crude electromagnetic shield. It was not elegant like Luminar technology, but it was functional, blocking enough of the interference to allow Wisp to begin stabilizing its energy patterns. "How do you know about Faraday cage construction?" Wisp managed to ask, its voice weak but amazed. "Human engineers study all kinds of problems," Jinwoo said, adjusting the makeshift shield. "We never know what we might need to survive." Getting Wisp back to the shelter was different from rescuing Veltar. The Luminar could not walk, but it could float weakly inside the electromagnetic protection Jinwoo provided. He carried the Faraday cage like a lantern through the storm, fighting wind and debris while protecting the fragile energy being inside. When they reached the shelter, Wisp immediately began to recover in the more stable electromagnetic environment. Inside, its glow grew stronger and more steady as its scattered consciousness pulled back together. "Impossible," Wisp whispered, looking around at the humble shelter that was protecting them all. "This structure should not be able to survive such conditions." "It was not built to survive," Jinwoo said, preparing to go back out. "It was built to adapt." Finding Grok was the hardest task of all. The Chithari's bunker had partially collapsed, and Jinwoo had to dig through sand and debris while the storm raged overhead. His hands were raw and bleeding by the time he found the warrior's location. Grok was trapped under a fallen support beam, sand pouring in around him through gaps in the collapsed roof. He was conscious but barely breathing, his mandibles clicking weakly with each labored breath. "Hold on!" Jinwoo shouted, though he doubted Grok could hear him over the storm. "I am getting you out." Using techniques learned from earthquake rescue workers, Jinwoo carefully shifted the debris without causing further collapse. He created a small air pocket around Grok's breathing apparatus, and then began the delicate work of freeing the trapped alien. It took precious time. Time they could not spare as the storm continued to rage and the bunker continued to collapse around them. But finally, Jinwoo managed to pull the big warrior free from the wreckage. Grok was heavy, much heavier than Veltar, and the journey back to the shelter was brutal. Jinwoo had to drag the semi-conscious Chithari through the storm, fighting for every step while debris flew around them like bullets. Halfway back, Grok regained consciousness and tried to help, but his injuries made movement difficult. Together they struggled through the chaos until finally, exhausted and battered, they reached the shelter. Nari helped pull Grok inside, and for the first time since the storm began, all 5 members of the expedition were in the same place. The shelter that had looked so primitive and inadequate now held them all. It was cramped and crowded, but the flexible design had anticipated multiple occupants. The curved walls created just enough space, and the multiple support systems distributed the weight evenly. Outside, the storm continued to rage with undiminished fury. Lightning crackled through the charged sand, and the wind howled like a living thing. But inside the humble human shelter, they were safe. The aliens looked around in amazement. The structure that they had mocked and dismissed was not just surviving the storm, it was protecting all of them. "I do not understand," Veltar said, his voice hoarse from shock and injury. "How is this possible?" Jinwoo was treating Grok's injuries with supplies from his emergency medical kit. "Different engineering philosophy," he said simply. "But the materials are inferior," Wisp insisted. "The construction methods are primitive. By every measure of engineering excellence, this shelter should have failed first." "Your measures assume that excellence means perfection," Jinwoo said, checking the storm's progress on his instruments. "Human engineering assumes that perfection is impossible." "Then how do you build anything?" Veltar asked, genuinely confused. "We build things that work even when they are imperfect," Nari answered. "We plan for failure." "Plan for failure?" Wisp's light pulsed with confusion. "That makes no logical sense." Jinwoo secured another medical bandage and sat back against the swaying wall. "It makes perfect sense if you understand that failure is inevitable. Every structure will eventually face conditions it was not designed for. Every system will eventually encounter problems the designers did not anticipate. So you build things to fail?" Grok asked, his mandibles clicking with confusion. "We build things to fail safely," Jinwoo corrected. "When one part fails, other parts take over. When the whole system is stressed beyond its limits, it bends instead of breaking." He gestured at the walls around them. "This shelter is not trying to be stronger than the storm. It is trying to survive the storm by working with it instead of against it." "But that is not how engineering works," Veltar protested. "You identify the requirements, design a solution, and build it to specifications. If the specifications are correct, the design will work perfectly." "What if the specifications are wrong?" Jinwoo asked. "They cannot be wrong. We have advanced sensors, computer modeling, millions of years of experience, all based on conditions you have seen before," Jinwoo pointed out. "But the universe is full of conditions no one has seen before. That is why we build robust systems," Wisp said. "Systems that can handle any conceivable situation." "You build rigid systems," Jinwoo corrected, "strong enough to resist known problems. But rigid things break when they face unknown problems." Grok was recovering enough to participate in the conversation. "Chitari bunkers have protected my people for millions of years. Underground is always safe." "Always?" Jinwoo asked. "What about pressure differentials? What about soil liquefaction? What about electromagnetic effects that change the behavior of particles?" "Those things do not happen on my world, but they happen on this world." The implications of what Jinwoo was saying began to sink in. The aliens had built perfect shelters for their own worlds, but they were not on their own worlds. "You are saying that our technology is inadequate?" Veltar asked, his pride still struggling against the evidence. "I am saying your technology is specialized," Jinwoo replied. "It works perfectly under the conditions it was designed for, but